The heat lay over the land like a blanket too heavy to lift. Not a wind, not a whistle of air moved across the valley. The sun had carved its path high and merciless, bleaching the world into the color of old bone. The dry riverbed cut a wide, pale scar across the plains, a memory of movement, etched into earth that could no longer flow. An elephant stepped into it. His feet sank slightly into the cracked ground, pressing into plates of hardened mud that split apart like puzzle pieces. Dust rose around his ankles with each step, lingering as if reluctant to settle back into stillness. His ears flicked once, not to push air, there wasn't enough of it for that, but to shake off flies that insisted on surviving even here. His skin, thick and creased like the bark of ancient trees, carried the color of the riverbed now. The line between body and land blurred with every stride. He paused, lowering his head. His trunk brushed over the soil, sweeping small mounds of dust aside, searching for scent. There was none. Water had not touched this place in months, perhaps longer. The river had forgotten how to be a river. He moved forward again, slow, steady, patient, not aimless. Elephants do not wander without reason. Somewhere far beyond the heat-hazed horizon, his memory told him there should be water. Trees with leaves thick enough to cast shade, pools deep enough to cool heavy bones. But memory did not ease his thirst. The ground shifted beneath him, a brittle crunch that echoed faintly along the dry channel. Once that sound would have been swallowed by rushing current, or smoothed by mud and reeds. Now, every crack resounded like a reminder of loss. The elephant lifted his head, tusks catching a glint of the sun. His eyes scanned the horizon, wide, empty land stretching so far that the sky looked like it rested against the earth. The air wavered above the ground, heat dancing in illusions that pretended to be water. He did not trust illusions. He trusted distance. A line of stunted reeds lay ahead, brittle and yellow, remnants of better seasons. He approached them and snapped a few stalks into his mouth. They crunched loudly, too loud, dry as straw. They offered almost no moisture, but chewing eased the ache in his jaw for a moment. A small bird fluttered up from the reeds, wings ragged, flight weak. It landed a few paces ahead, hopping twice before stilling again. Even birds found no comfort here. The elephant stood a moment longer, letting silence settle around him. His trunk curled once more, tasting heat instead of scent. Then he continued walking, deeper into the riverbed, deeper into memory, because his body remembered where water once flowed, even if the land itself no longer did. Above him, the sky hung blank and blue, too empty to care. But far, far out of sight, something was gathering, slow and unsure. Clouds. The riverbed widened as the elephant moved deeper into it, as though the earth itself had stretched out long ago to make room for water that never returned. The sun pressed relentlessly against his back, heating the dust until it felt like standing above a fire that had burned too long. With every step, the ground responded. Dust rose around his feet in slow spirals, clinging to his legs and settling into the deep wrinkles of his skin. It coated the coarse hairs along his spine, turning them pale. Even his eyelashes gathered the fine powder, making each blink feel like scraping sand. The dust behaved like memory, eager to return to him, eager to remain on him. He exhaled. A cloud of gray carried his breath away, dissolving before it reached the dry reeds behind him. The world had too much space for air to fill, and too little moisture to hold it together. The elephant paused again, letting his trunk fall gently to the ground. He pushed away loose chunks of earth, searching for anything darker, anything wet, but every layer beneath was the same, dry, cracked, lifeless. His trunk brushed over the soil once more, an action more ritual now than hope. He stepped onward. Flies persisted in a small halo around his eyes, landing on the corners of his mouth, where the skin was soft enough to tempt them. He flicked an ear toward the irritation, but the heat made even that simple effort feel costly. A gust of wind arrived, sudden, unsteady, stirring the dust into a larger cloud. It wrapped around him briefly, a brown veil that obscured the edges of his shape. The elephant stood still, waiting for it to pass. His eyes narrowed against the sting. When the wind faded, the landscape returned, unchanged. The dust dropped back to the earth, though never exactly where it began. The riverbed had shifted, however subtly, with his presence. High above, the sun still dominated the sky. No birds called, no shadows moved. But the elephant could sense something different in the air now. A thin thread of relief trying to pull itself together. A scent so faint, it could have been imagination. The promise of rain. Not the kind that comes easily, the kind that needs permission to fall. His tail swung once, slow, as if acknowledging the possibility. The riverbed curved gently north. His feet turned with it, following a path older than his memory. A path carved by ancestors who had walked here when water shaped every step. Dust lifted again behind him, rising like a signal into the still, shimmering sky. And somewhere far above, beyond the reach of heat and silence, a single cloud gathered weight. The elephant reached the bend where the riverbed narrowed again, carved deeper by water that once moved like muscle through the land. Now its walls were dust-soft cliffs, marked by long cracks that spidered downward like veins drained of blood. Ahead stood a line of acacias, thin, strained shapes against the harsh horizon. Their branches reached outward in angles too sharp to offer comfort. Their leaves were few, curled tight to save what little moisture remained. Still, they stood, defiant in their own quiet way. The elephant slowed as he approached the first tree. His trunk brushed the bark, rough beneath powder, warm from relentless sun. The tree gave no shade. Its narrow crown was barely large enough to cool a bird's shadow, let alone his. But its roots ran deep. They remembered rain, even when the soil above forgot. He pressed gently, tugging at a low branch. A few brittle leaves snapped off, breaking with a soft crackle that felt too loud in the dead air. He chewed them slowly, bitter, dry, but they offered the faintest taste of green, something alive. A bird rustled within the sparse crown, a hornbill, feathers dulled by days of heat. It hopped once, shifting its weight as though unsure whether to fly or simply pretend to be part of the tree. When the elephant's trunk lifted again, the bird spread tired wings and glided to a neighboring acacia, moving as little as possible. The elephant moved on. More trees stood ahead, scattered along the old river's curve, a small congregation of survivors. Their roots clung tightly to earth that refused to feed them, stretching deeper each day into hope rather than certainty. He paused beneath a slightly fuller tree, fuller only by comparison. A thin strip of shade angled along the ground, uneven and broken by the shape of the trunk. He stepped into it, though the temperature changed barely at all. Still, shade was shade. His ears flapped, heavy and slow, not for comfort, just to remind himself they could. The air around the acacias felt different. Warmer at the base of the trees, cooler near the tips. The branches creaked faintly in a breeze too weak to carry dust. The sound was a memory of forests that once bent boldly under storms. He listened, not for danger, for life, for anything that believed in tomorrow. Far up the dry river, a faint rumble stirred. Not thunder, not yet. More like something shifting in the sky, a restless turning of weight that had been still too long. The elephant lifted his head sharply, his eyes narrowed, watching the horizon through shimmering heat. The trees did not move with excitement or fear. They simply watched, as they had watched everything. Animals come and go, rivers rise and fall, clouds gather and forget, holding history in their roots. Their leaves quivered once, in agreement with the distant tremor. Rain was not here, but the sky was remembering. And the elephant, a shadow among the stubborn acacias, waited for the next change to reach him. The heat did not ease. Even with the faintest stir of wind threading through the acacias, the air felt dense, as if it had been held under the sun too long and forgotten how to move freely. The elephant pushed forward again, leaving the patch of thin shade behind. The riverbed widened once more, stretching into a long corridor of pale dust bordered by stunted brush. His feet pressed deep into the cracked earth, leaving large, clean impressions in soil too dry to resist. Each step sent a small ripple of dust outward. It rose only a few inches before falling back, too heavy to drift, too exhausted to climb. His breath grew louder, a steady rumble pushing through thick air that clung to his lungs with every inhale. He curled his trunk and drew in a deeper breath, searching again for the smell that had teased him earlier. That ghost of rain. It was there. Barely. A thread of coolness tangled in the grit. He paused, ears wide, listening. The sky remained silent. Not the silence of calm, but the silence of something withheld. Clouds gathered far above, still small and separated, unsure of themselves. They cast no shadows, offered no promise. They only watched the land as if deciding whether to intervene. The elephant raised his eyes toward them. His gaze lingered on their edges, soft, gray outlines that trembled faintly as if pulled by invisible hands. They looked unsure, like travelers who had lost their map. He gave a low, rolling rumble, not a call, not distress, simply a statement of presence. The sound vibrated through his chest and out into the empty heat. No echo returned. The air absorbed everything: sound, scent, motion, holding it suspended, refusing to let the world respond. A flock of small birds erupted suddenly from a dry patch of reeds, wings beating frantically. They flew only a short distance before landing again, too tired to escape fully. Their sudden flight said what the land itself would not. Something was coming. The elephant continued at a slower pace now, conserving energy. The ground beneath his feet softened slightly, almost unnoticeable but real. Dust was turning to soil. The earth was preparing. Another breath of air brushed across his side, colder this time. He stopped again, feeling it pass. A shiver ran up his leg. Not fear, recognition. The pressure in the sky had shifted. The elephant lifted his trunk high. His nostrils widened. He tasted new weight on the horizon, the kind that clouds carried before transformation. The air, after waiting far too long, was just beginning to remember movement. The first sign wasn't wind. It was a feeling. This is where weather comes back to life. He saw the change before he felt it. A dim patch of shadow slipped across the ground. Soft-edged, unfamiliar. It glided slowly over the dry riverbed like a shy traveler arriving late, unsure if it was welcome. The elephant stopped and lifted his head, trunk suspended in the air. Above him, a single cloud had grown bolder. Not large, not dark, but full enough to block a piece of the sun. For the first time in many days, shade reached the earth without belonging to a tree. The elephant stepped into it instinctively. The temperature dropped by only a fraction, but his skin felt the difference immediately. A brief relief spreading beneath the dust. The cloud drifted further, its shadow moving with it. The elephant followed. He watched the sky more carefully now. The other clouds, once scattered like ash, were gathering, pulled toward the center of the heavens by a purpose they hadn't felt in a long time. Edges sharpened, shapes gained weight. There was movement up there, slow but deliberate. He stopped again as the single shadow widened. A soft breeze brushed across his trunk. Not the dry breath of the desert wind, but something cooler, carrying moisture packed tightly inside it. The elephant flapped his ears, stirring pockets of warmth away from his body. The feeling that followed wasn't comfort. It was anticipation. Beside him, a patch of cracked mud softened. Not visibly, but the smell changed. Dust loosened its grip on earth. He pressed his foot deeper into the ground. The soil held shape this time, forming a print with sharper edges. Small grains stuck to his skin instead of falling away. Signs. Small ones, but real. High above, the cloud continued its slow march, its shadow crawling across the plain like a living thing. It thickened in the center, gray seeping toward blue, blue dimming into silver. The elephant could feel tension in the air, a pressure like held breath. The valley seemed to wait with him. He lifted his trunk again and tasted the sky. The promise of water was no longer imaginary. It was climbing down from the heavens, one shaded moment at a time. The elephant stepped forward again, keeping pace with the cloud overhead, a giant beneath a tiny herald. Two travelers moving toward the same destination, the place where the river would return. The cloud above him thickened into a darker shape, folding inward like a fist. A tension filled the air, dense and electric, but silent. Even the birds felt it. They did not flutter or cry. They simply ducked lower into the brush, waiting. Thunder belonged here. This kind of sky demanded it. But the world held its voice tight, reluctant to break the long quiet. The elephant walked deeper into the shadow cast by the growing cloud. His ears twitched at a sound that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The faint crackle of air stretching itself, shifting into new form, a flicker of light, far away at the horizon's edge. A thin pulse, sharp and white, threading through blue and gray like a vein erupting suddenly beneath skin. Lightning, but the sound never followed. The elephant froze, trunk lifted. He waited for the roar that was supposed to come after the flash. The powerful voice of the storm announcing itself. Silence answered instead. No echo, no rumble, no vibration through the ground. Only the soft hiss of dust as it shifted beneath the faint wind. The elephant blinked, unsure. Lightning without thunder was like movement without weight, a warning that hadn't learned how to speak. Another flash, closer this time. Still no roar. The sky was practicing. The clouds overhead thickened into a dark ceiling, pressing down like a lid. Shadows grew heavier across the land, layering over one another until colors turned muted and cold. The elephant smelled rain more clearly now, sharp metallic scent pushing through dust. It stirred a memory deep within him, something stored in bones, the sound of water rushing over stone, the comfort of mud against tired legs, the song of riverbirds filled with certainty. He rumbled low in his chest, a sound of readiness. The clouds shivered in response, expanding outward, merging into one great shape. Lightning cracked again, not wide, but deep, like a vein running through the heart of the storm. Quiet lightning, silent thunder, a sky remembering how to be heavy again. The first gust of real wind swept across the riverbed, cold and sudden. It lifted dust into spirals that scattered quickly and fell. The elephant narrowed his eyes against the grit. His tail flicked with purpose. The world was seconds away from change. He stepped forward, toward the deepest part of the riverbed, as though instinct knew exactly where water would choose to return. And above him, the storm gathered courage on the edge of breaking. A silence so deep that even hunger paused. The air held its breath, thick with promise, stretched tight to the point of trembling. The elephant planted his feet firmly in the lowest part of the riverbed. The ground there was darker now, ready. His trunk swept the air again, searching for what he already knew was moments away. A drop fell. It struck his forehead and slid down the curve of his trunk, cold, unmistakable. He blinked slowly, acknowledging the truth of it. Another drop, then two, then dozens. The sound began as a soft tapping, polite, uncertain, dust-swallowing noise faster than rain could create it. But the sky understood how to continue. The droplets grew thicker, heavier. They struck the riverbed with weight, sinking into the earth at first, then beginning to pool as the parched soil reached its limit. The elephant opened his mouth slightly, catching water on his tongue. It tasted of sky, clean and sharp, a flavor he had nearly forgotten. Rain filled the cracks in the mud, turning hard lines into soft curves. Tiny rivulets trickled from one depression to another, gathering, shaping new paths. The first faint reflection of the storm formed beneath his feet, a thin, wavering mirror of gray. A gust of wind surged, stronger this time, pushing the rain sideways and filling the air with motion. The dust that had clung to the elephant's body washed away in streaks, revealing the deep, earthy color of his skin beneath. The clouds finally gave their voice. Thunder rolled, slow and heavy, as though the sky cleared its throat after too long a silence. It vibrated through the elephant's bones, stirring something ancient inside him. A call older than language. He lifted his head toward it, letting the rain strike his cheeks, his ears, his back. The sensation was not comfort. It was revival. The riverbed was no longer still. It churned in tiny movements, reshaping itself grain by grain. Pebbles glistened. Mud awakened. The beginning of water returned with reverence, not rage. Birds erupted from the brush, wings slick with new life, calling out in ragged voices as if celebrating with disbelief. Even the acacias seemed to straighten, leaves uncurling to welcome what they had waited for. The elephant took a step forward. Water splashed. A real sound. He walked slowly, savoring each movement as the ground softened beneath him. His feet left deep impressions, filled immediately by rain. The river had not returned fully, not yet. It would take time for the channels to fill again, for pools to form, for the plain to remember lushness. But the sky had remembered how to fall, and the land had remembered how to drink. The elephant turned his body toward the widening path the water would soon take. His ears relaxed. His stride lengthened. He was leaving the dry river behind, not as a grave, but as a promise awakening. The storm roared again, louder this time, confident, no longer timid with its rebirth. And the elephant walked on, following the direction of thunder, toward the place where water would gather first.